This network of rackets is now dissolving and thrusting the industrial nations into a deflationary depression. Without the something-for-nothing portfolio of Frankenstein securities, the financial sector is shrinking back to a size consistent with what we really produce, of value. The process is a mortal agony. We will discover through it how little of value we really do produce, and we will be faced by a pretty stark new reality. Trillions of dollars of assumed units of wealth in dollars, euros, or pounds sterling are leaving the system now in a workout of bad debt greater than the world has ever known. They are being sucked into a black hole, and they will never be seen again. This is a capital that will not be available for many of the things that even forward-looking Americans had hoped to apply them to. The ghost of all this vanished wealth will return within the next few years as a very destructive inflation, as the US government prints ghost dollars to pretend that we are still a wealthy nation. This is a crisis of capital, among other things. I maintain that capitalism is not a belief system. It is a set of laws governing the behavior of surplus wealth. It is not our enemy. Our enemy is a set of habits that defeat sound local networks of economic activity and interdependence that produce true local community wealth. It's not necessary to rant against the implications of continual economic growth moving toward infinity. This is self-evidently self-destructive and unsustainable. It is of greater value to pose a useful counterpoint to the idea of destructive infinite growth. What I suggest is that we remove the word growth from our political and economic vocabulary and replace it with the term fruitful activity. Fruitful activity can occur on a stable, long-term basis. It is obviously the way all successful ecosystems exist, and the human race has to exist in an economic ecosystem consistent with the laws of nature if we are going to be around more than a few decades. What has seemed normal to us in our time will certainly be viewed as an aberration from the long view, especially the scale of our operations. The peak oil situation will require us to live much more locally, whether we like it or not. All the complex systems we depend on will have to be reformed and rescaled. Reality will compel us to. We will have to grow a lot more of our food closer to home. The age of the 3,000-mile Caesar salad is over. We'll have to rebuild those local networks of wholesale and retail trade, and the national big box discount that were destroyed by the national big box discount chains. We'll have to reduce our ranges of daily travel, and somehow we must get the passenger railroads going again, because the airline industry as we've known it will not exist in 48 months. And this is a particular pet peeve of mine, by the way. The fact that this was not in the political arena this fall at any level, and don't blame Mr. Obama either, because it wasn't on the agenda in any race anywhere in the United States. So we have ourselves to blame for this. But if we don't rebuild the passenger railroad system quickly in this country, we're not going anywhere. And it's terribly important for a number of reasons. The first is that the airline industry is going down as we've known it. It's not going to be around anymore. But there's no other program we could do right away that would have a greater impact on our oil consumption. It would put scores of thousands of people to work at useful jobs at every level of labor. It doesn't require any new infrastructure. We don't have to reinvent anything. In fact, I think that we ought to be very careful about avoiding getting stuck in high-tech adventures with rail. As I'm fond of saying around the country, we have a railroad system that the Bulgarians would be ashamed of. And we have to demonstrate first that we can do it on the Bulgarian level before we should move on to the level of maglev or the way they do it in France or Germany or China. It's terribly important. It's also important for this reason. We need a project that we can do together as a people to demonstrate that we're competent, that we're able to greet the realities that are coming at us and act intelligently. And this is the best place to start. And the fact that we're not talking about it shows that we're not a serious society. So we have to overcome a lot of these tragic blunders. Another one of the tragic blunders we've made, of course, is centralizing all of our schools to make them hostage to the yellow school bus fleets. And this is going to be an issue that is going to, right now the action is focused simply on the cost of it and the property taxes that are excised to support it. But sooner rather than later, we're going to run into the basic problem of being able to run these things at all. And by the way, notice that the schools are designed physically to be exactly the same whether they're built in Florida or Vermont. They're all one-story, rambling, flat-roof buildings that are not easy to heat. Well, we have an awful lot to do. 4 days ago, the people of this nation, and we're still a nation, elected a new president. For many of us, this was a stirring spectacle. I have no cynical feelings about it whatsoever. The talking heads on TV have complained that Mr. Obama's talk of change was not specific enough, that it had no content. But we can state very clearly what he meant in the first instance. Regime change. That's what kind of change. We didn't say that for 20 months. But that's what it is, regime change. Right here in the USA, not in some funny, faraway place where people wear funny headgear. Right here. Regime change. The Republican Party, which I call the party that wrecked America, will now have to go crawl off to some dark place under a log or a rock. And it will have to metamorphose into something better, or else it will just fade into history. But it will be it will be doing that off stage for a while. And now Mr. Obama's party, which is my party, has to face the smoking wreckage of the economy and all the greater challenges posed by the peak resources problem and the painful transition out of an ultra-high energy way of life into something consistent with our energy realities. So I would ask this convocation to give Mr. Obama your help and your prayers, apart from whatever plans you may rightfully have for the very real prospect of becoming self-sufficient here in the Green Mountain State. This exhilarating regime change means that we can at last roll up our sleeves and get on with the adjustments and reforms that reality will compel us to make anyway. We have a very long to-do list. We don't have time to be crybabies anymore about anything, about gender, about race, about class, about all the things we've been wringing our hands over for the last 20 years, especially my generation. Our biggest challenge is to form a coherent consensus about what we face and then get on with the job, as Vermonters and New Yorkers and Americans have always done. So I wish you good luck, and thank you for your attention, and I'd be happy to start a conversation in the chamber now for whatever time's left. And by the way, I think many of you have microphones at your desks if you're at a desk.
You can turn